ultimately I'm the one that's driving this ship, and the AI is really just enhancing me. And so to a certain degree, I almost, it hit me. I'm like, no, what these tools are doing, they're not replacing me. They're giving me superpowers.
Chad Nelson is an award-winning creative director and technology strategist with over 25 years of expertise in designing cutting-edge interactive experiences and entertainment. His portfolio includes industry-leading video games, TV shows, both traditional and interactive, mobile apps, and 3D tools for digital artists. As co-founder of the technology startups 8 Cylinder Studios and WGT Media, Chad has collaborated with Fortune 100 companies such as Microsoft, Intel, Sony, and Virgin. Chad also serves as a creative collaborator with OpenAI. Chad and I met after the release of one of his recent creative ventures, the animated short film Critters. This short is a groundbreaking achievement as the first film with visuals generated entirely by OpenAI DALL, then brought to life by incorporating classic Hollywood animation techniques. And we waited to release this episode because OpenAI's DALL has changed the trajectory of Chad's career, and hitting newsstands this May 3rd, you can see Chad's AI artwork featuring real photos of Bella Hadid on the cover of Vogue Italia. When it comes to visual artists and pioneers at the forefront of collaborating with AI, look no further than Chad, who sees AI empowering him with superpowers to push his own output and creativity, and who never in his life imagined that his art would end up on a Vogue cover. Today, you'll get to hear all about Chad's creative process, what questions he's thinking about related to AI, how he approaches prompts, the making of Critters, and so much more. Enjoy.
But have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Chad, so excited to have you here today. For those who don't know you, can you introduce who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So thank you for having me, first of all. I'm Chad Nelson. I'm a creative director. I've been doing this for almost 3 decades, and I've directed creatively video games, television shows, social media, advertising campaigns, brand strategies. So I've had a very interesting background playing with a lot of different ways. Creatives can essentially touch content, touch digital technology, and then get it to essentially audiences.
Oh, and one thing that you had said is you've kind of made a career out of testing new tools. Mm-hmm. And we're here today to talk about DALL and your new film. But I'd love to hear kind of, I guess, how you came to find DALL and how this tool is really different than the other tools that you've been playing with.
Yeah, it's been fascinating because OpenAI emerged on the scene, I think in mid 2001, when GPT-3 was kind of getting a lot of press, and people were starting to talk about natural or large language models. And I was very interested in how that could be applied to, say, a video game type application where you could almost use GPT-3 to do dialogue in games as opposed to just pre-recorded scripts or script trees, as we kind of like to call it. And so I was very interested to see how that could be applied. So I started to kind of figure out, okay, well, should I write them? Are they licensing? And it was still in an R&D phase for them. And then they dropped this DALL news. And I knew, okay, wait a second. I'm a visual artist. I'm a designer. I live for visuals, art major. And so I'm like, I have to try this. I have to experiment with what this technology can do. Because when I saw the renders and the first outputs, I mean, they weren't just primitive, like chicken scratch or cave paintings. Now, these they started to look very good. Long story short, I didn't know anyone at OpenAI at the time. So I was like, barking up various trees through LinkedIn and so forth. And then one of the artists I follow on Instagram is a guy named Don Allen III. and there's also Karen X. And these are two influencers. They're very well known in the creative community. And I saw this pod or Instagram announce that Dawn was going live with OpenAI. I'm like, wait, whoa. I stopped. I think it was at a farmer's market. And I stopped. I raised Tom. I'm like, I need to watch this and see what's going on here. I want to learn as much as I can. And then a woman from OpenAI was on the live stream as well. And at the end, she said, anyone who is here, I think there was about 60 of us, send me an email. Here's my contact info and state why you would like to have access to DALL-E. So, of course, I wrote her immediately. I think about a week later, I got access. And that is when this whole journey began. I mean, it's literally began the start of what's turned into an amazing, unexpected year of just creativity and discovery. And I can, looking back now, it almost is ironic that it was almost like that time of before AI or before DALL-E and now after DALL-E. Like that literally was the weekend.
That's amazing. And I also, just the social media person in me, loves the Instagram through line of how you got connected with OpenAI. And that's also how you and I got connected too,
That's right.
Which we'll get to the animated film in a second. But tell me, like the first day that you played with DALL-E, because that was kind of like an aha moment, like what your first experience was. And then you also started an Instagram account that day too.
Yeah. So OpenAI had been showing images of like things like a squirrel on a skateboard in Central Park, or an astronaut, eating cereal on the moon. They're kind of fun novelty images, and they seem like little party tricks to a certain degree, or just like, and it was almost like a lot of the images to date were like take A plus B, and the AI or DALL-E would produce, C, and that was cool, and I thought that was fun. But when I got access to it, I was very interested in how well could it simulate emotion? How well could it simulate something that we essentially connect with as a human, as an image that is presented to a human? Would we emotionally respond to it? And one of the things that I was almost instantly, in a way, disappointed is that OpenAI said in the beginning we could not do renderings or generations of people, of actual people. They didn't want the deep fake concerns. They didn't want people doing celebrities or public figures. And so they threw up those guardrails. And so I felt, well, I still want to explore this concept of emotion and how we can simulate that. And so going back to some of my old animation days, what do? You personify it through characters. And so one of the first prompts I essentially typed in was a red furry monster looks in wonder at a burning candle, which just sounds like, okay, I don't know what the red monster looks like. I don't know anything about the room or the setting, but I know he's looking in wonder. I hit, enter, generate, and 15 seconds later, this image popped up. And it's the first images that's on my Instagram account now. But I was blown away because the character, you could see it immediately in its face, its eyes, its expression. Yes, it was like this little imaginative, almost Sesame Street, Jim Henson sort of looking Muppet sort of creature, maybe a hint of Pixar in there as well. But it truly captured wonder. And I related to it immediately as a person. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a moment now where the AI has created something and I'm emotionally connecting with it. And so that started me on a journey for the next almost somewhere between 6 to 8 hours. I could go back and look at the log, but of just exploring different emotional states and joy to sadness to I literally was like, oh, can I have these characters? Can I make characters dance? And I did a whole DALL-E disco theme. And so I basically spent that whole day just creating character after character until finally I was like, all right, I'm tired. I better, call it a night. And I looked at the body of work that I had produced and it hit me. I have never produced in a single day as an artist of of multiple decades. I'd never produced that much output in a single day like that ever before in my life at a quality that I thought was maybe not everything was great or everything was perfect, but oh my gosh, most of it seemed like finished quality renders. And so I packaged up a few of them. I sent them to OpenAI and thanked them. And then I created the Instagram handle Daily DALL-E, because I was like, wow, I have enough content here. I could post for the next 30 days, 60 days with like great content just once a day. Okay, I guess I'll call it Daily DALL-E. And so, yeah, that's how the handle came to be. So I think I made it like that around midnight that night, and I put up the candle, or the red furry monster with the candle as the first post, and then went to bed. And that was literally my first day with DALL-E.
I love that. And for all of the listeners, and if you're watching on YouTube, we'll put the images and the links to where you can follow Chad and see this for yourself. Because I think one of the cool things that I've noticed with any of these tools is like really when you demo and start playing and see for yourself, that's when the like aha moment, really clicks and people start really understanding the power of these tools. So you had said, I think in your Instagram live with Natalie recently she shared that the researchers at OpenAI didn't believe that the images that you were creating were coming from DALL-E. Did that start with that first red monster looking at the candle?
So the email that I sent OpenAI, I essentially made a collage, or like of I think 30 of my favorite creatures or critters, essentially, that I built that day, or generated that day, I should say. And I sent that off to them, and that's when Natalie wrote me back a day later and said, "Oh my gosh, these are amazing. I'd love to show them to the whole team. We want to find out more about you." And so I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." And then they wrote me again saying the researchers wanted to know how much of this was Photoshop versus DALL-E. And I said, no, it's all DALL-E. I mean, you obviously could check my logs. And so then a day later from that, then they replied with, "The research team would like to meet you. They want to find out more about how you went about the process you used to get these results, because they didn't think it was able to produce at that level at this stage in terms of its training and its I guess you could say based on its training thus far."
Yeah, which is really amazing. And I know one thing that you and I have talked about recently is like that it's so interesting that the creators of these tools don't fully understand what they're fully capable of yet. And like they're looking to artists like yourself and users to kind of see how far it gets pushed.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely one thing that OpenAI has done very well, I think, over this last year is the researchers definitely have a way of, they have their own likes and their own personalities and their own quirks or interests and so forth. And so I'm sure they're testing through a lot of different elements. But when all of a sudden you have a collection, I think they've built around a dozen or so, maybe 24 artists kind of in a little circle, if you will, a trusted circle, to say, experiment with the tools, push it, take your unique style, your unique interest, be it fashion or architecture, or in my case, I'm doing more kind of entertainment and animation and so forth, and characters. So each of us pushes it in different ways and gives that result back to their team. But in the beginning, they hadn't established that yet. That was like, so in a way, it was still very much the early days, like the clearly the pioneering opening moments, if you will, of let's explore the nation and see what's out here in the Wild West.
So April 6th, 2023 was a big day for DALL-E. It was the 1-year anniversary. And on this date was a special day for you too, where you released Critters, the first ever AI-generated animated short. So tell us, the story of how Critters came to be.
Yeah, no, it was incredibly exciting. I was so thrilled to launch the film. We had been working on it for now almost a few months, actually, since the holidays. And it all came to be because in the beginning, when I started working with DALL-E, as I mentioned, I started creating all these characters. And in my mind, I was like, well, I have backstories for these characters. I have there's motivation. It's like Disney with the 3 or 7 dwarves. It's like there's stories behind these funny little personas that I'd love to tell. But I didn't really think anything of it for a while. And then in September, OpenAI released Outpainting. And then Outpainting suddenly allowed the image to go from squares, almost like little Instagram posts, to now you could do full letterbox HD images. And now I thought, well, now this is now taking us from what was kind of a fun little, almost a photo, like a Polaroid. And now I could actually do something cinematic. And it's that point where it hit me. I'm like, oh, no, now is the time we need to start making and tell it. Like, really, let's tell a story. let's make a movie. And so I pitched it to OpenAI, I think around right after Labor Day, and just said, hey, what's your thoughts? And then their marketing team and comms and Natalie, and they were like, oh my gosh, could we do something? That would be incredible. Do you have an idea? And so I said, yeah, I have an idea. I'd love to take the characters that I created in the first day that you all know and you've all now seen and everyone's seen, and let's bring them to life. And let's do it through a David Attenborough style documentary. But instead of it just being that, let's have it all of a sudden collide with a Monty Python sketch and all the little critters speak. And all the narrative that the Attenborough character says about who they are and what they do in their daily routines is wrong. And what you really find out is these critters are a little bit more like us, in that they're going through identity issues, they're in therapy, one's maybe a conspiracy theorist, or like one is a female executive of the forest, and she's still always struggling with the idea of getting respect. And so I wanted to be a little bit of a reflection of our own society through, of course, these characters, and do it as a short film and make it just a fun, kind of clever, humorous 5-minute experience to really push the technology. And let's see, could it actually tell a story? And I think that's how it all, that's how it all came to be. We basically then said, all right, once Open agreed to it.
Yeah, I think that's a key point I didn't say in the introduction, is that not only did you release it on April 6th, you released it in conjunction with OpenAI through their Instagram account as well. So big congratulations on that. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all. I mean, we wanted it to be, it was always a collaboration. I mean, OpenAI, this was really for them to showcase the tools. And I'm so glad that they trusted myself. And then one of the producing partners that I had worked with in the past for a number of years, a company called Native Foreign. They're down in Los Angeles. They do advertising campaigns, commercial campaigns, a lot of production. And I knew they could really jumpstart essentially Critters in helping out with casting, getting very talented voice actors. I didn't want it to be essentially AI voices or simulated. I really wanted to utilize real Hollywood talent to bring the characters to life. And then they also had a repertoire of animators, Emmy award-winning and nominated animators who had done known cartoons and a ton of commercial work. And so in a way, I was providing, if you will, a storyboard or kind of building the world and setting the stage. And then in partnering with them, they could then run with it and really bring it across the finish line. So yeah, it was a wonderful collaboration between myself, Open, and Native Foreign that actually allowed it to come into fruition.
Yeah, and it's really fun. We'll link to it and make sure to embed it in the show notes so everyone can watch it. It's definitely worth the 5 minutes. And I know you wanted to share a little audio clip. So do you want to tee up a little line from some of your critters for our audience to listen to now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the basic setup is I'm going to have you listen to the characters when the narrator, David Attenborough, who's actually not David Attenborough, he's David Attenborough's neighbor, Dennis, who is trying to basically be his own David Attenborough type, documentary filmmaker. And this clip is going to be when he suddenly hears the critters speak for the first time as they start talking back to him. So yeah, let's let it roll.
Looking upward, we find the red jackal spider. It's hairy,
sir?
distinctive for
Excuse me.
Wait, I'm sorry, who is speaking?
I'm speaking to you.
Oh dear, I've eaten the wrong berries.
Nope, it ain't the berries.
What? Who are you?
I'm Frank.
And I'm blue, which is weird, because I'm a red spider.
I cannot call you Frank or Blue. This is a science documentary.
Science? Ha! You think secretly filming someone while they sleep is science?
Why, yes.
Why, no. It's creepy.
So creepy.
Definitely watch the full one. I don't want to give any spoilers. And we'll also link to the making of, the behind the scenes too. And we'll get a little bit more into that. But one thing I know that you've said that really resonated with me is like, kind of the intent and goal behind Critters is to kind of start a larger conversation about what these tools can do, and also, be an inspiration. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about, it sounds like you had a lot of fun, but kind of some of your goals going into creating this short.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also stems back to even what my whole goal with the Instagram community that has now just emerged. I mean, my personal goal was never to become an influencer in social media. It just somehow happened because of all the interest that I started gaining followers, and and so in a way, it's kind of a happy accident that this has all happened. But one of the roles that I've learned that I guess I want to take is how can I help inspire and how can I entertain the audience that I've at least been able to grow thus far, and then partnering with Open, how can I continue to entertain and, or more so, to educate and inspire their community, because their community is much, much larger. And I think there are a lot of questions that people are asking about what does AI mean to creativity? What does it mean to the Hollywood community, the art world? What does it mean in terms of there's numerous ethical issues and so forth, which I'm sure we can talk about more deeply. But my point with Critters was I like the idea of going through a real case study. Let's say, okay, we're going to make a movie. We're going to write a script. We're going to hire actors. We're going to bring on the animators. We're going to edit it, put in music, and do all the visual effects and take it across the finish line. And at the end, we can say, what did we really learn from this? Where did AI really speed up the process? Where is it still kind of weak, or actually not even providing any benefit at all? And not doing that in a closed bubble for our own knowledge, but more so to say, hey, no, community, wherever you are in the world, Hollywood, just a storyteller of any sort, like, yeah, come find me, send me a message. I'd happily talk, because that's the whole point of this, is to share information so that people can see how AI actually can empower them and allow them to succeed in realizing their dreams and visions or ideas in their head, as opposed to just feeling like they have no outlet to explore them.
Absolutely. And we're definitely going to get more into those questions. One thing that really resonated when we spoke too is to be sure to be asking these bigger questions, but also like have fun and explore and like tap into the possibility that these tools offer. But since we did mention the harder questions, let's dive into that just a little bit. Yeah, especially since you're like so close to it and are a creative in the space. And then we'll go more into the technical and fun things too. I think one of the things that we discuss kind of is, when I tell people about this podcast, I see sometimes a really visceral reaction of like fear. And I've already got a few emails about the downsides, and I'm sure you have too. And I know jobs comes up a lot, but how do you respond and how do you think about it when you have these conversations?
Well, I first start with my own personal journey with it, which is, in the beginning, I was amazed. As I said, when I got DALL-E, I was playing with it, building characters. All of that was true. There was definitely a moment, maybe a day or two later, that it started to hit me that could this replace me? Am I training a model to suddenly do my job, and then thus I'm slowly going to become extinct? That was a very, of course, real fear. And then and I had to go through this process of kind of rationalizing or kind of grasping with that thought. But then all of a sudden, kind of at a certain point, it hit me, which was, I see what these AI tools can do, and they definitely can produce a myriad of amazing images. But what I found is that it has no idea if it's one image is great and one image is just terrible. I'm still, in a way, a curator or ultimately an art director, a visual designer, a creative that's saying, no, let me steer this ship. Let me guide these tools to produce the work that I think would essentially best resonate with that spark that's in my head. Like, the tools are not going to deliver that on their own. I need to be the one that kind of still drives it. So artistically, I found, no, I'm still in the driver's seat. And I still find that, yes, I mean, the tools will get even more advanced from where they are now. And don't get me wrong, I think that's going to happen. But I find that as an artist, as a creative, I really like the idea that I am driving, essentially using these as tools to drive a vision and to create a vision, and not really the other way around. In going through that process of building all these characters, I definitely felt that sense of fear for a good while, where it's like, oh my gosh, am I training something to essentially take my job or replace me some point? But then it hit me where I realized, no, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm the one that's actually determining if, one image is great and one image is terrible. I'm the one that's actually steering, if you will, these visuals through in painting and out painting, which we should talk about in a second too, and what that means. But ultimately, I'm the one that's driving this ship, and the AI is really just enhancing me. And so, to a certain degree, I almost, it hit me. I'm like, no, what these tools are doing, they're not replacing me. They're giving me superpowers. They're actually making me think through my ideas much faster than I've ever been able to think through ideas before. And I think that all of a sudden, when it hit, and it turned from fear to empowerment. And so that's where it was like, for myself, I'm like, I want to continue to perpetuate that message, and in a way be evangelist of that, so that others can say, yeah, you should, give it a try and learn these tools, because I think what you'll find is, if you have any creative sparks in your head, that these tools are going to help you explore those ideas much faster than you've ever been able to before.
I love that. And one thing that you said with the Instagram Live with Natalie before the release of Critters is it also helps you determine or figure out the bad ideas too, and that's a really important process that you do as well.
Yeah, no, and the creative process is not a vector. You don't just say, "Hey, I have an idea," and then one path, and then all of a sudden you hit execution or the finish line, and you're like, "Oh, that's it." No, creativity is it's far more like wandering through like a web of spaghetti in terms of exploration and experimentation. Sometimes the happy accidents, if you will, of not like, "Oh my gosh, what just happened? Oh, I like that." That actually can influence your art. And I feel, in a way, that process of going through just exploring ideas, the random ideas, if you have that voice in your head that says, that might take too long, I don't want to do that, well, then that means you might have cut off an idea prematurely and not really explored it. And now what I find, again, with AI is that time is a barrier, and maybe that effort, since that somewhat goes away, almost entirely, you can really explore a lot more ideas and push the boundaries of that sandbox or that playground to really explore what you really, like or don't like, I think, in a much, like I said, much faster and more efficient way.
Before we go too much into the more fun side and technical sides, what are some of the tougher questions related to these tools that you're thinking about? Because I know you said yesterday, you have probably the most problems with Midjourney from an ethical standpoint, just kind of how they train their data
had to
sets.
point that out, did you?
Didn't know if you wanted to speak to that.
No, I just look.
Well, I do want to have those hard conversations, or at least have them on our radars to be thinking
All
about.
right. One of the reasons why I mean, don't get me wrong, I think Midjourney is incredible in producing unbelievably good results. I mean, the Midjourney 5 is out now. I've, of course, played with it. It's phenomenal. But I think we have to take a step back and say, well, where are these tools getting trained? Is that training data licensed? Is it scraping just the public web? Is it looking at celebrities and IP owners or brands and saying, all right, we're just taking every Porsche and every Star Wars character and every celebrity, and we're just going to utilize them freely without any sort of agreement with those license holders or brands or celebs, and then also not compensate them at the same time. So to me, there's something as an artist where I think there's something that it doesn't sit well with me. Now, of course, the law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to speak to how copyright law and all the legal challenges that lie ahead. There's much better, smarter, more experienced individuals that can speak to that. However, I do know as an artist, that is not the way I would want the world to work, which is, once it's on the internet, just anyone can just use it however they wish. I like how OpenAI puts up guardrails. They do. I mean, I'm sure you can find, and let's not say I'm sure, I know for a fact, if I typed in SpongeBob, I would get a SpongeBob image in there. But it's not based on the licensed SpongeBob imagery that they just stole from, and maybe steal is a harsh word, but just lifted off the public web because it happened to be on a Viacom website for Comedy Central, like that, or a Pinterest library, or wherever they might have gotten those images. And then on the flip side is there's also things you can do to prevent people from searching for keywords. And so, although I know OpenAI loves to create guardrails on known public figures and certain celebrities and so forth, they and even living artists. I know there's numerous talks about how do you control making sure that people can't just go type in someone who's famous and alive right now, who's practicing and living a life as an artist, and let's just allow you to just kind of replicate their style immediately. So there's ways of creating guardrails for that as well. But I think, but these are the questions that we have to talk about. And then if you do want to have your art go into a database to let it be trained, is there compensation? Do you get actually some monetary value back based on usage or some other structure? I think these are the questions that we're asking. And it goes back to my point earlier about it. This is the Wild West. I look at it as there is a lot of wonderfully pioneering spirited companies out there and individuals like myself. But I like OpenAI because they're definitely encouraging the dialogue with artists, with corporations, with brands, with governments. I know. I mean, at least I know they at least have some conversations, if you will, with agencies and so forth about what the implications of AI are. But that said, I just feel like, yeah, we're all figuring out the answers together. And as much as we want to say the law could keep up, the technology is still moving so much faster that it's almost impossible for the legal side to be right at equal step with where the technology is advancing. So that means companies have to take a more responsible stance and take the more ethical approach versus just pure, I guess, capitalistic approach.
And that's one reason for this podcast, to explore all the fun, but also, to be part of that dialogue as well, as as you said, it's the wild, wild west, and we're all just trying to figure it out. So let's talk about more fun things, unless there's any other bigger questions that you're thinking about.
Job loss is always the one that everyone's like, oh gosh, the AI is going to take my job. It's going to take my job. And look, I've been in the business of creativity for almost 3 decades. And in all that time, I used computers, essentially, or the computers, internet, essentially digital technology. I can tell you from when I started my career to mid-career to today, I am not using the same tools. I'm not using the same computer. I'm like, it is always evolving. If you think about it, a web developer, remember when a web developer or a web designer more so was like a job that you could and now it's like, is anyone really hiring like a dedicated web designer? It's just like that job came and went in a blip. And so I feel like whatever the next jobs are, we have no idea what they're going to be, but I know they will exist. And one way I look at it is the analogy of say film editing. So you had film editors used to use, reel to reel and of course, actual film strips and the tape. And it was a very kind of hands-on, tangible process. And people kind of love that element of it, but very few people could do it. Then digital nonlinear editing came out, Avid and so forth. And there was a lot of almost like, oh, this is not editing. This is going to ruin the craft. There's an artistry to it. And it takes your hands off it's like, it's all now you're separated, the human element separated. And that was I guess a concern for a bit. But if you think about it now, there are more people editing content with essentially digital editing tools than there ever were in the 80s or 70s or 60s before that. I mean, we have far more people editing on an iPhone daily than we had an entire Hollywood industry before. So to me, it's like, it's fascinating how these things just, we can't predict all the new jobs. I actually look at it and say, well, there's a lot of optimism ahead as opposed to pessimism.
Yeah, and I share that viewpoint too. Like before the smartphone, how many photographers were there? Now everyone's a photographer just because it's one tap of a button on your phone. And I think you said something funny yesterday, like the irony of the camera too.
Oh yeah. I mean, an iPhone has, the latest iPhone has more software, and one could even argue AI software in it, than any camera ever created throughout history. And yet I am still a photographer, just as if I'm using a manual camera with an iris that's mechanically, or like, no. You're talking basically to a electronic device that is almost a supercomputer in historical standards with advanced AI that's taking a picture for you. So to me, it's like, but yet you're still a photographer. So I think that's just, it is the irony.
So for the viewers and listeners who are hearing about DALL-E for the first time, can you kind of just give like a little 101 intro to bring everyone into the fold of what is DALL-E?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to think about what DALL-E is doing, imagine yourself as a human and you are given images of, say, cats or of houses or of cars or just things, fish, etc. And you're given thousands and thousands of images. And so when I would as an artist, if I were to type in, oh, I'm looking for a fish in an aquarium, with these attributes, just like a human would say, oh, okay, you want a fish, you want an aquarium, oh, you want it on a table with a plaid, tablecloth. Okay, you have all these things recorded in your head, and you can say, okay, now great, I can then take all those items and essentially create a new image. In a way, DALL-E is doing the same thing. It's being taught all these things that exist in our world, and not just like material things, also qualities. And so, what is depth of focus? What is golden hour? What is so if you think of all these terms, it's given images to describe what or to represent what those descriptions mean. And because of that, when you type in a prompt, it taps into all this knowledge that it has. And then it says, great, I'm now going to take all of that and turn it into a brand new image. It's not Google where it's an image search. And it's not Photoshop where it's taking a bunch of images and then just doing some sort of magic collage. It's literally generating a brand new image based on all the knowledge it has based on your keywords that you used in the prompt. So it is an original piece of art. It is an original creation that has been inspired by pre-existing material. And which is really, if you think about it, that's no different than who we are as humans. All we do is we see things in the world, we store it in our brains, and then when it comes down to time to create and to express ourselves, we tap into that knowledge that still exists up here to then come up with something that's maybe a new interpretation of it. To a certain degree, DALL-E in a way is very much like us. It's an artist just like us, but it's knowledge that might include, I don't know, 2 billion, or no, I think it's like 1 point something billion images. I don't know what the official number is, but we also have a lot of imagery too. So in a way, it's like, yeah, it's only getting smarter, but it's doing what we do. And I think that's where it's important for people to understand. It's not just stealing an image that's existed on the web. It's literally generating something anew from all the images that it has in its training model.
Well, let's talk about some of the technical aspects, because you did mention that you've tested Midjourney and a bunch of the different tools, but you keep on coming back to DALL-E. So tell us why you keep coming back to DALL-E and some of the differences between the tools outside of the ethical stuff, which we already addressed.
No, I think so creatively, this is one where I think it's very interesting because every tool out there, I mean, Adobe now has their own AI generative models. There's Stable Diffusion, obviously Midjourney and DALL-E. They all will do a very similar thing, which is, okay, let me type in a prompt and I get a result. And in a way, that is kind of like you're curating a piece of art. It's like it's almost like there's an artist sitting in your room or at your house, and you're saying, hey, here's what I want to describe, here's what I imagine. Can you paint me this picture? And the better you are describing, I think the better result might be. But you kind of aren't really an artist at that point in some ways, because it's not like you're really doing anything. You're just asking in the way that artist you're commissioning it. And I feel like that's what Midjourney is. I'm talking to an incredibly advanced Pixar rendering engine or ILM rendering engine. It's incredibly advanced. It's super cool. But I don't really feel like I'm ever getting my hands dirty. I'm not getting my fingers wet in the paint, if you will. And the difference with DALL-E is I think comes down to the very simple fact is it has in-painting and out-painting. In-painting basically allows me to take an area within the AI generation. And so, for example, let's say I did a portrait. I could just paint on the eyes and say, no, let's do additional generations on the eyes or on their lips or their expression. I could, maybe I just want to change the whole background or paint in some clouds, and not as a painting, but as an AI generative, essentially created clouds or landscape. And so because of that, I feel like I'm manipulating and massaging or evolving the image more like an artist would in Photoshop, or if I'm working painting on a canvas, than just commissioning a piece from a rendering engine. And I think as an artist, that to me is a kind of a real fundamental difference, because, some people say, well, then you're not the artist if you use AI. And that's where I kind of have a little bit of an issue. I mean, yes, AI is a very general term. And if I was arguing, maybe I would accept that argument maybe if it was around just a pure mid-journey approach. But knowing what I do with Dolly, and so for example, with Critters, one of the characters, Blue the red spider, I literally have probably 50 different generations for just the eyeballs, another like 50 to 60 generations of the mouth. I played with the legs. And so it's like, ultimately that's a creative process. You're working the image, you're working the ideas, you're massaging it and pushing it. Like I said, that is not just, oh, AI, give me something and oh, see, it's mine. Like it just feels different. And I feel like that is as a creative, I really love that fundamental feeling of I am the one that's creating it. I'm the one that's driving it. I'm the one that's pushing it. And that's why I like the Dolly tools for me personally, because they are built around that type of experience.
I know I'm sure our listeners are very curious about your prompts, because one thing that stood out to me too is just kind of your 3 decades of experience, how that your expertise informs your prompts and how you still need to know how to talk to these things. So I'd love to hear or have you share with our listeners and viewers, how you approach prompts, if you don't mind.
So in the beginning, they started very simple, almost just conversational. And that's why the red furry monster, looks in wonder at a burning candle. It's just a simple statement. And some of the times or some of the prompts I've seen from other artists get very keyword, or almost like they're like hashtag theater, where it's like ultra realistic 4K and it's just like And don't get me wrong, that can sometimes work. It's, again, depending on the app as well. But I found that I like to describe it more like you're writing a little bit of a screenplay, where you first describe the setting at a broad level. It's almost like think of a funnel. You start at the top, which is like the broad setting. It's a bedroom, or it's a misty bar, or it's a misty forest, or and then you start going into from setting to then the characters or the subjects within it, and then from the subjects within it, then you get into maybe the lighting or the time of day or the atmosphere and the mood, and then usually where I end with is the aesthetics, the camera, the film grain, or the other maybe visual details that would kind of ultimately like oh, it was printed via a Polaroid or on an old Kodachrome camera print or 70s print, etc. So in a way, it's like I would never write a screenplay by describing the camera and lighting first before anyone even knew what you were talking about. And so that's kind of how I approach the prompt writing. When people write me and ask, like, why are your prompts working out so well? And mine are just not working. And I say, well, send me one of your prompts. And I realize that sometimes people just are describing things in a way where a computer wouldn't know logically what you're talking about. It's almost like they're bouncing through ideas. And so it's like, oh, there's a dog in the room, but the camera's up high, but then there's another dog and it's behind. Like, you're like, wait, like the computer is not going to know like how this super ball of thought is bouncing around in a box. It's not going to know how you're thinking and approaching it. So no wonder your images aren't working out as well.
Yeah, because they're reasoning machines and the intelligence. They can't read your mind.
No, you have to speak to them logically. I think the more logically you can speak to it, where it just feels like you're, like I said, if you were reading a screenplay, the first thing you'd want to know is like, okay, where am I? Or then, okay, what am I looking at? And then tell me about what makes it unique, or what are the attributes then of that scene and that setting.
And you mentioned, you've been kind of surprised at how other AI artists that you've connected with, and there's like a burgeoning AI artist community, which is really great to see. Kind of some surprising things about how they approach it. So can you kind of share what surprised you about some other AI artist approaches?
Yeah, I mean, everyone that I've met, I mean, there's so many talented individuals, and some are almost more like the way they talk to it is more like poetry. That I'm much more logical and rational or kind of factual with my prompts and descriptive. And I've seen some artists that they almost describe the mood and the feeling less descriptive about the exact subjects. And to me, it's fascinating because it leaves a lot more to chance, but that chance and that more poetic approach yields some amazing results. And visually, like when I've tried to do that myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you feel like it's like almost like more of a visual slot machine. You don't even know what you're going to get back, but when it does, what you do get back is astonishing. And I do love that. But that's just that. I wouldn't have even thought about that until I had met one artist in particular that's kind of their whole tactic, if you will.
Amazing. Well, and one thing that kind of stood out too, from our conversation and just kind of watching the film and the behind the scenes, are also the limitations of these tools. And that you've kind of said, with Nick, that there's still a lot of work to bring it with traditional filmmaking, to bring it from where you started in DALL-E to what everyone can see today. So can you kind of talk to us about, the limitations and where the divide and conquer, where you stopped and where Nick's team kind of picked up the baton?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of visual storytelling, we're only now just beginning. And again, depending on when this airs, I mean, this is how fast this industry works. It's like this could air, and all of a sudden, it's like everyone's now doing text to video. But right now, text to video is still very experimental. Most of the work I've seen from R&D departments, I mean, Google's released some, Facebook's released some. Runway obviously is showing off some things with Gen 2. It still kind of looks like almost like a dream world. It looks very like it's like that LSD vision where it's like you're kind of going through a surreal world where nothing is quite intact, nothing feels truly material, everything feels a little surreal and amorphous, if you will. That's going to change at some point. I don't know if it's 2 months from now. Heck, maybe by the time this launches. I mean, that we might overcome that. But for right now, we know we can create incredible looking stills. And we know there's this theory that you're going to be able to create ultimately, essentially motion pictures. This tech there's still a pretty big jump. It's still, I wouldn't call it comedic where we're at right now, but it's definitely in a little bit of that uncanny valley. No one would ever accept it as real. Stylistically, you might be able to work through it a bit to deal with those limitations, but it reminds me of like the days even when like the first AHA Take On Me video came out and said, "Oh, let's try doing animation on video." It was an experiment, and obviously it became a signature piece in terms of video and animation because it took some new approaches to combining two different mediums. And I think we're in that kind of phase right now where we're just really at an experimental playground, an R&D phase that we're in, and eventually it's going to hit prime time. When that hits, I'm not sure, but probably more so months than years.
Yeah, I think I saw Karen X demoing she got preview for one of those tools. So you set the scenes and the characters, and then any movement in critters. That was really Nick and his team. Is that kind of the handoff point?
Yeah. So going back to now Native Foreign, I helped kind of design the world and build the world and figure out what I want it to look like. And then I would have a still. I'd have a beautiful, landscape 16:9 HD or 4K actually image. I would then give it to Native Foreign, and then they, using their talented artists and animators, would essentially cut it apart and break it into layers and then bring it into After Effects or Premiere, or I'm pretty sure it was mostly those two tools predominantly. Maybe there was another 3D tool like Blender or something, but let's just say it's predominantly After Effects. And from there, you could then say it's like your flat image is now, you have a tree in front of another tree, and you can basically create these layers where then as you move a camera through it, it suddenly has three-dimensional depth. And you could add mist, you could add dust, you could add motion and movement and leaves falling, and all of a sudden the world started to become alive. And so, that was kind of the handoff that we used for this project because, like I said, the tools weren't able to deliver what I was hoping in terms of motion right out of there's no package that could do it. So we used, like I said, traditional techniques combined with the AI.
And something that you said that I love is that you never even imagined, like being able to create an animated film at the quality and level, because you're not really, an animator in that way, right? But this kind of opened that up for you.
This is I think, a general theme overall with my experience with AI is that when you start your career and you're thinking about like, what kind of artist am I going to be? What type of creative I'm going to be? When I was in art school, one of the things that was taught to you is like almost like pick your lane. Like, do you want to go into computer animation? Great. Well then, but also what do you want to go into computer animation for? Is it lighting? Is it modeling? Is it animation? Is it special effects and particle systems? And so it almost became very like task and or technique oriented. And what I'm finding now with the AI and these opportunities is no, I mean, I might understand a lot of those techniques. I am not an expert in rigging. I'm not an expert in lighting. I'm not an expert in modeling. I understand all the principles behind it. So as long as I can actually describe what I want, the AI can really take me across a finish line and get me the work that I think is almost, I wouldn't say equal to what a traditional artist might do if it went through a true Pixar type production path. But it gets me pretty darn close. And that's what enabled me to, or allowed me to say, oh, I can make a short film. I could actually do this. I could make something that might not be truly a $100 million Pixar budget style film, but it's going to be pretty darn close in terms of quality. And as long as the writing and the cleverness and the humor works, I don't think that shortcoming will even be missed. And that's what I hope to prove.
Yeah, and it's so exciting. Well, we'll get to the possibilities in a second. Well, you mentioned, or we were kind of talking about the limitations of these tools too. And one thing that you had said is the DALL-E dead end, and you learn a little bit about their training and their limitations of training. So I was curious if you could share kind of the creative limitations in working with these tools too.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's just like working with a human. It only can produce what it knows and what it's been taught. So if I asked it for an obscure Italian ceramic designer's, pottery from, say, a certain year, I mean, unless it knew who this sculptor or this artist was and their work, it wouldn't know what to do. It would give you probably something similar that would say pottery or Italian. It would just give you some sort of amalgamation of what it thinks might be best at recreating this very specific thing. And I found that that's where I think it's been interesting. As I've gotten deeper into DALL-E, I'm starting to find some of these knowledge gaps and holes. For example, I mean, here's one example your listeners might respect or relate to, which is like, I needed to do this one photo shoot campaign, and we wanted to do have a model in front of a vintage Italian sports car. But the stylist specifically wanted a very space age wedge style design from the late 60s to the early 70s that Lamborghini and Ferrari and a couple others were, had experimented with. And so I'm like, oh, no problem. We'll start creating. We absolutely can create that. And then I realized, no, DALL-E had no knowledge of that. DALL-E actually had no knowledge of that specific model of Lamborghinis or Ferraris. It knew generic Ferraris and more of the popular ones, but it had no idea of that wedge-based space-age design aesthetic that was for probably about, 4 years, kind of in the auto industry. So again, it was just like, well, I guess I found a knowledge gap. The other side of it is, as you mentioned, the DALL-E dead end, is DALL-E and the way these image generators work is it knows those are clouds, or it knows, oh, that's a person sitting on a picnic blanket, or there's a puppy on the side. It knows those things. But then what I find is if you do enough in painting, and again going back to DALL-E and in painting, if you continue to massage it and manipulate it and change the imagery through in painting, eventually you hit a dead end where it just realizes it can't go any further. So for example, like you could say, I don't know. Again, let's describe a family having a picnic, and you've done all of these things to make this picnic setting perfect, and then you say, no, I want to have a flying whale in the sky, just something completely abstract. Well, you've probably done so much manipulation to this image that there's so many keywords and tags all over the place that for it to put a whale there, it's like, I don't know what you're asking for. I don't know how to do this, and so it just doesn't. You've almost, in a way, the soup is too saturated. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what I call the DALL-E dead end. It's just you've manipulated the image to the point where it cannot be touched or manipulated any further.
No Twitter fail whales over families with picnic.
I don't know why that example hit my head first, but it's a classic example, the whale that's above a picnic.
Well, I love this talking to creatives because this is you never know what you're going to get. Well, and one thing that you've shared is that you are encouraged about like working with OpenAI. So what makes you encouraged in your collaboration and partnership with OpenAI as we kind of look to the future and the excitement around the space?
Yeah, I think it's just they've been very good about keeping this conversation very much a two-way street. Their researchers have shown me some things to test where they're like, we'd love for you to just experiment with this, play with this, tell us what you think. And in return, I can answer back with my thoughts on either current DALL-E, on any R&D things that they happen to show me. And in a way, I feel like the fact that they're going into the artist community and knowing kind of the group that I work with, I mean, I can speak to myself, I can't speak to the others, but we are all pretty diverse though. And in terms of just even who we are as humans, but our backgrounds and even our professional kind of day-to-day lives. And so each of us has a unique perspective of how we think the tools should work, what we expect of the tools, our concerns with the tools. And I just really appreciate this notion that a technology company is not just racing to create features and get it out there and just launch it in a way that, well, we'll ask those questions later. Let's just get it live and then see what happens, and then we'll adjust. I think they've been very in tune with what it is, the implications of these technologies might mean for humanity. And then certainly, even if they don't know the answer, they're at least wanting to hear conversations from everyone involved just to help figure out what that answer might be. And so that's been my experience thus far.
I love that. And I know the tools come a long way from like saving prompts and that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any like wish list items that you want from the tool that you can share of like?
Well, I mean, there's some things I can speak to, some things I cannot. But I mean, as you can imagine, like I'll just actually also speak to Adobe, what they're doing. I mean, obviously they just came out with launching Firefly. I am, of course, very excited about that. One, I think it's cool that they're doing a database or a training model of all licensed imagery, so you don't have to worry about these copyright issues and stealing from other artists. And they're also creating a training model so that you can, and then a compensation model. So as an artist, I can help them get better and figure out a way of getting some beneficial return from that. But I think what's most important from their side is, okay, great, I can take this right into Photoshop or Illustrator or Premiere, After Effects, and so forth. And it just seamlessly fits into my workflow. That is a huge advantage that as they continue to develop Firefly, I think will be, strategic for them and certainly it'll take AI from kind of a novel thing that maybe a few artists are doing to now millions and millions of people are using essentially generative tools in their kind of daily task as artists. I think GPT has certainly made mainstream AI for a much larger mass of people than say DALL-E has, and just because it is the potential for what it can do. But yeah, I think as far as features specifically for DALL-E. Obviously I just released a movie, so I'm very curious on how we can take stills and translate those into visuals and what those tools might look like. Very personally passionate about those types of applications and either how professional or more consumer friendly. Is it like, are you going after prosumers? Are you going after really hardcore coders that can actually do this? Or are you just really going after people that just need that almost like as easy as it is to use, say, PowerPoint, just to drop an image in? Like, should it be that their focus? And I think, each of these different companies will figure out where their target audience is. But there's definitely some ways where I would say I'm more in the prosumer to professional And I'm far more interested in those types of improvements to the tools.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure a lot of people will be playing and experimenting if they haven't. We encourage you to after listening. Well, one thing that you had said is, these tools really are kind of opening up this like democratization of access to being creative. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk to that. And like even, you said that it was easy for you to bring your animated, I put easy in quotes. There was still a lot of work that went into critters, but made it possible to bring to life. But that we're going to see a whole new crop of storytellers that we might not otherwise hear from. And like, that's exciting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's face it, art school is not cheap. I think some people, if we look at this planet at large, there's a whole group of people that would just never even have access to go study. To be able to walk into the Louvre or into the MoMA or any other museum or have the library and the access to all this visual imagery, for them to feel like, oh, wow, I could actually pursue this as a career. I think some of these tools, it's amazing because in a way, yes, ideas go from spark in the head to something that could look at professional grade in moments, which means there are probably millions of people in this world who never thought of themselves as an artist, who suddenly now are creating artwork. Now, what they do with it and if it turns into a professional career or not, who knows? But I just think it's going to open up far more doors in the visual art world than anything that we've had to date. And I think that's as you mentioned, photography. The iPhone has made more photographers and people now are far more passionate about, oh, I got to get the right picture and they're probably taking more pictures than they've ever taken in their lives, thanks to the iPhone. I think more people are going to create art because of these tools than ever before in human history. And I think that's amazing. The second side of it is, I think about a career. So we talked about like my career being roughly 3 decades. I think it's pretty safe to say you could almost measure how much output any given individual, based on the set of tools that we've had for these last 30 years, how much output could someone actually deliver per decade? A student coming out of art school now with these tools, they might lap me in 5 years. They might literally lap my entire career output in under a decade. And so in their 30-year career, they might have gone through 3 lifetimes as an artist. And to me, that just is staggering because that just means people are going to allow them, or they're going to have the ability to explore new ideas at a rate and a depth and breadth that we just haven't had in human history. And I think, again, as an individual artist and creative, if I was starting my career with this, how exciting is that? That is, to me, that is like where I get the most joy in thinking about the young minds right now, where they're going to be, even just in 10 years. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I got chills listening to you as you said that. Yeah, I have an 11-year-old niece who's super creative, and I'm so excited to see what she does. But also, you're not. You still have a long.
No. I'm not the end of my career.
Span of your.
I'm not the end.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you're going to do in the next decades too, with expanding your own portfolio.
I mean, just in this last year, Dolly had, when I got access to Dolly, it was in May, so it came out April 6th. I had it in mid-May. So we're not even, again, depending on when this comes out, but I haven't, let's just say it's been a year. I have produced more art and more visuals and pushed myself creatively further than I've ever had in any single year in my life, thanks to these tools. And to me, that has just been, it fuels the soul as a creative. It just feels like I love the idea, some people are into fitness, it's like they need that kind of constant routine, if you will. This has become my creative routine. It keeps my mind fresh. I give myself little daily challenges. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I love Daily Dolly so much is I might just say, okay, what's this week's theme going to be? Might just be completely out of my comfort zone. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just dive in this week and let's see if I can explore that theme and create some imagery as best I can in that theme. And then I'll post it and we'll see what people say. So in a way, it's pushing me to explore my own creativity in ways that, again, I just didn't think I would ever be doing over a year ago. I would have never even have thought about this at all.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And I'd love for you to also share the story about one of the creators you came across who had the stroke, because I thought that was a really
Oh,
amazing
yeah.
story about how it opens up people to create things that might not otherwise as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've numerous people have written me thanks to Daily Dolly, and they'll tell me their stories, or they'll tell me, their background, and maybe why they're inspired by my work, and then I'll see their work and I'm blown away, and then I'm like, you're inspiring me. I mean, this really more so the reverse. And so when you start meeting some, various individuals from around the world, I mean, honestly, from all around the world, uh, you start to find out what is this, why did they get into AI? Like you asked me in the very beginning, like, why did I get into it? And so one individual that I have recently met was an artist, a practicing artist. They were very into, the physical arts and sculpture and so forth. And unfortunately, due to a stroke, lost the ability to really manipulate art with their hands, and essentially lost that dexterity and that ability. And as you can imagine, as an artist, that's your whole life to that point. Losing that would be very depressing. And then DALL-E hit, and once they had that access again to now create, it was almost as if their life was not completely reborn, but in a way they were given a whole new chapter in as an artist, to still be able to continue their creativity and continue to explore it, in a way through that life circumstance that, you never know what life's going to throw at you, but they found a way to now, through this AI, to continue to be that creative that they always were. And to me, that's like, I love when you hear a story like that, because that's what this technology can help in ways that emotionally, for example, like we can't even, I'm sure the AI researchers didn't even think about that when they first started writing this, and what it could mean to creatives around this world, in that emotional kind of just standpoint alone.
It's so powerful. And I know something that we both share is that, that every person has that creative spark and is a creator. And I'm so excited to see what these tools will open up, and even more stories like this. I know you just released a film, but I have to ask, do you have any other projects coming out or up your sleeve that you can share with us today?
Thank you for asking. I'm very excited, at least, to talk about this project I've been working on for a bit, where OpenAI partnered with Condé Nast to do a Vogue cover, and it turned into a whole Vogue spread with Bella Hadid, where we used DALL-E imagery to create backgrounds and to, in a way, build on a more surrealistic version of settings, and incorporating with the fashion to essentially create imagery that couldn't be created through just a normal photography and through a camera and so forth. And so I'm excited to launch that, or to announce that, and then to basically see it in print in May as the cover for Vogue Italia specifically.
Amazing. Well, I'll be sure to get that cover and we'll link to it in the show notes. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, congratulations. What a big, could you ever imagine that you'd be working on a Vogue cover when
No.
you started playing with DALL-E?
No, this goes back to the whole statement of where this year started, this last year with DALL-E, to where it is now. Never in my life, in my little list of goals of things I would hope to achieve, did I think Vogue cover would be on that list. And so again, these are things where I'm like saying to myself, it's unbelievable where the opportunities and creativity, places that I never even thought I could be a creative artist within an industry. I mean, Vogue is the highest end of fashion. I am not a fashion guy, and suddenly now I'm working with the incredible stylists and photographers, and then of course one of the biggest supermodels in the world. That to me it's again mind blowing that those doors have opened.
That's amazing. And I still feel like you're just scratching the surface. So who knows what will come next, but we'll definitely all be following along. Tell us, how can people find you? And we'll definitely put it in the show notes. And any closing thoughts that you want to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
Yeah, so you can find me at Daily Dolly on Instagram. But one of the reasons why I built that site, and why I'm doing podcasts like this, and I think it's so important that you're doing this, is because the dialogue, the conversation, for people to kind of come together as a group of collection of artists, as humans, entertainers, storytellers, and really say to ourselves, like, what does this AI mean? Like, what are all the applications of it? What are the concerns? What are the ways that it will empower us? And what are some of the things that are genuine fears? And I hope that all of this is just ultimately just a way for us to start talking about it collectively, and work through these, if you will. I'll go back to the theme of the Wild West. Let's work through these things together and really build the future that we all dream of, that we all want, and that it really is, at the end of the day, empowering to humans.
That's the best way to close this interview. It has been such a pleasure. I couldn't say that better myself. Thank you, Chad, and congratulations again on Critters. And I'm so excited to see, where these tools go, the new creatives and art that we're going to see, and what we're going to see next from you too. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big, big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.